Okay, we continue our video series on Stoicism, and we were going through the Enchiridion by Epictetus, and I'm using this translation, How to be Free by Professor A.A. Long, and we had ended up at chapter 11, so let's get started. Never say about anything, I have lost it, but say, I have returned it. Has your little child died? It has been returned. Has your wife died? She has been returned. I have been robbed of my land. No, that has been returned as well. But it was a bad person who stole it. Why? Are you bothered about the individual the donor used to demand its return? As long as these things are given to you, take care of them as things that are not your own, just as travelers treat their lodging. Okay, well, this is a very interesting chapter. So here's how this makes me feel. First of all, Epictetus returns to a theme that we have already discussed, and that is the theory of letting go. Right? The point of letting go. The more attached you become to things, the harder your life can get, because attachment by definition also means that you may become afraid to lose that thing. And fear, sorry, I had to take a sip there. Fear is a bad thing, because if you live in that fear of something may happen to this, something may happen to my partner, to my child, to my house, to my car, to whatever possession it is you value, that fear will hamper your personal growth because it becomes a preoccupation. Now, that is something that we have already discussed. So I don't think we need to go into a whole lot more detail in that on that specific aspect. What I find very interesting here is, again, there is that emphasis on that same point. You have to be able to let go. You have to train yourself in letting go by continuously thinking about things that happen in a slightly different way, by changing your perspective. And one way to do it is what Epictetus suggests here. Instead of saying, I have lost this or that item, say, I have returned it. And philosophically speaking, that's actually a very interesting statement, because that suggests that something never really truly is yours. You're only its keeper for as long as it is yours, or the product breaks. Now, that's one thing when you're talking about products. Like we talked about a jug at some point, because that's the example that Epictetus gives. You like a specific jug, and you have to tell yourself it is just the jug. And then one day it may break, but then at least you're prepared because you know it was just the jug. Well, that's one thing. It becomes a little bit more complicated when you're talking about losing your child, or losing your wife, as Epictetus states here. But when you think about it, it again boils down to a similar process. Your child, or your wife, or your husband, or your partner, or whatever else other person can play an important role in your life is not your property. So at any point in time, those persons can be taken from you. Either because they say, I do not want to be a part of your life anymore, or because they pass away, or because something else happens, but they never were really yours to begin with. You just got to be a part of their life until they said they did not want that anymore, or until something happened to them. And of course, if something happens to you, you are gone. So we're not going to discuss that. So thinking about things in those terms, this was actually never really yours. My wife is not mine. My wife is only with me until she says she doesn't want to be with me anymore, or something happens. That can make things possibly a little bit easier, relatively speaking, because of course losing a partner for whatever reason, or losing a child, is a terrible thing. But it's terrible because you make it terrible in the mind of a Stoic. By changing your thoughts, as we've discussed a number of times before now, by changing your thoughts, you can make things terrible or you can make them acceptable. That's a choice you make. Now here's a thing that I find very interesting that made me think what Epictetus says here. I have been robbed of my land. No, that was returned as well. But it was a bad person who stole it. Why are you bothered about the individual the donor used to demand its return? That's a good question. And you can actually think about that, I think, in two ways, because these are two very valid points. Well, the first valid point is, why do you care about the thief? The thief has just taken something from you. And I'll come back to that in a second. But if you're focusing on that and how terrible that thief is and he shouldn't have done that and how could it possibly steal from you, that's so unfair, yeah, all of that's true. But you're wasting your energy. Because no matter what you think about that thief, it's not going to change anything, is it? So it's the wrong thing to focus on. If you want to focus on something after something has been stolen from you, focus on processing it and saying, well, this was stolen. It really sucks. Still have my life and my children or partner or friends or whatever you have in your life, right? So again, that's a matter of looking at things from a very different perspective, but I think a perspective that can make things easier to process. But now here's another thing that's very interesting to consider when you get a little bit more into Stoicism. And I think I read this example in the book How to Be a Stoic, but it clicked with me, so I want to share it with you. I had my wallet stolen once. It was in my locked office, but unfortunately a master key to the building had been stolen a couple of weeks before, and someone of course had access to that key, and that person could just enter all the offices, and that day a whole bunch of colleagues had items stolen, wallets and phones and all kinds of stuff. And I was very annoyed because there was a credit card in there was cash money in it, there was a driver's license in it, there was all kinds of stuff, so it was gone. And I had to call the bank, and I had to get a new driver's license, and I lost some money. And I never carry much cash, but that day I was about to go on a short trip, so I had extra money. It was all a problem. But this is all fine. It's fine. It's all stuff that quite simply, as a Stoic, you would say, well, I can endure it. It's not great, but I can endure it. I just lost some money. Sucks. I have to go through trouble to block my credit card. Sucks. But let's be fair, after a 10-15 minute phone call, that's over. And then you have to change your thoughts and say, well, I did it, there's nothing else I can do. So I continue. But here's the much more interesting point. The point, as I said, that was raised in the book How to Be a Stoic. You also have to look at it from this perspective. If you follow the path of Stoicism, what you're trying to do is lead a virtuous life. Lead a life where you obtain Eudaimonia, as we've discussed before, a rich and fulfilling life. But in the mind of a Stoic, to reach such a fulfilling life, to live such a fulfilling life, you need virtue. And you know what is a surefire way to give up virtue? Deliberately stealing other people's property. And I think I can say, not with 100% certainty, but with quite some certainty, that this person who stole my wallet and other people's wallets and phones did not do so because he could absolutely not afford a single shred of food. It's not that type of situation. This is not a matter of stealing a loaf of bread because you are starving. This is a matter of just being a thief. But think about it. If you deliberately steal from other people, you relinquish your virtue, then you are not leading a life of Eudaimonia, nor can you lead a life of Eudaimonia, because by definition, in the mind of a Stoic, to be in that life of Eudaimonia, you need virtue. So think about it from that perspective. Well, I lost some money and some credit cards and my driver's license. I have a new driver's license in a week. I have new credit cards. I have the old stuff blocked. I lost some cash. Well, that's lost forever. That's how it is. But I have virtue. And this thief was forced, or chose, which may be even worse, to abandon his virtue. And therefore he left the path of Eudaimonia. Now, I don't know if that sounds really weird, because you may say, yeah, so what? But he got his money, he got the stuff. True. But if you want to be a Stoic, virtue must be top of your mind all the time. Because without virtue, there's no Eudaimonia. So the thief compromised his virtue and then had to lead a less fulfilling life. And even though you were stolen from, if you're in control of what you're thinking, if you don't seek out this thief and exact some sort of horrid revenge, you're a virtuous person, and you can still have Eudaimonia. You held on to your honor, to your virtue, and the thief did not. Food for thought. And that I find the most interesting aspect of this chapter, because Epictetus says it. Why are you bothered about the individual the donor used to demand its return? Don't be bothered by the thief. Be bothered by your thoughts. If you can process your thoughts and use the techniques we've discussed to change how you think about something, there is no real issue. And you're good. Chapter 11 of the Enchiridion. I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye.